Hello and welcome. This is the Global Business Podcast and I'm your host, Mark Philpott. Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. If you're a first-time listener to the Global Business Podcast, welcome. It's great to have you on board. If you have been listening to the first couple of episodes I've done, thank you very much for that. This is a show where I get to speak to business people all across the world, from startup entrepreneurs to people that have been doing it for a long time. We talk about big corporations, multinationals, and those not-for-profit organizations that are out there as well. Yes, we cover the whole business environment. So if you're looking for some inspiration, motivation, or education on business, this is the place for you. Let's get stuck right into today's show. I've got another great guest all lined up. It's a very warm welcome to the Global Business Podcast to Mr. Ugarte. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for asking.
It's great to be chatting to you. Last time we were talking, you were telling me about running a marathon around Antarctica.
Yes, I've done quite a few marathons around the world, the 6 majors, and I've done every continent except Africa. And so this year I was supposed to do Kilimanjaro, but there was 2 parts that stopped me doing that. The COVID pandemic and the fact that I didn't finish my house in time. So I had made an agreement with my family that I hadn't finished the house by a certain date. I couldn't go do that marathon. So next year it is.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to add to that to make sure that you stick to the continent and not incontinence, because that won't help when you're doing a marathon.
No, I actually, one of the marathons, you know, you always, I know you've done a couple of marathons, quite a few marathons too. You sit with a pacer. And I picked one pacer. She was a female, and I noticed that she got extraordinarily sweaty at one point in the race, only below her waist. And I thought, oh, damn it. Like I was making sure I wasn't getting flicked in the face by her incontinence on that continent anyway.
A tip for following one of those pacers is to put a very long bungee cord around the pacer and back to yourself, and that always helps as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, we're going to be talking business today. Whereabouts in the world are you chatting to us from?
I'm chatting from my waterfront property on the Sunshine Coast, and we are, it's a beautiful 2-acre property. So it's my home, it's my office. The talent come in and work from here, and we've got a little recording studio in here that we blast out to the world from as well.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Well, for those people that are listening around the world, the Sunshine Coast is just north of Brisbane in Australia in the beautiful state of Queensland. And we have about 2 days of winter a year here at the moment. And I think we've had those 2 days at the moment, Ian, haven't we?
Yeah, look, last couple of days got really, really cold, down to like 18 degrees. It was crazy.
Now, I thought it was a good opportunity to start a podcast show and talking about business. I had a lot of requests from around the world to kind of help people at this, difficult time. Everybody's facing different challenges within their business. So you're a guy that's been running businesses for a while. So tell the audience today, what kind of business are you actually running today?
So we run several businesses out of this office. I suppose the predominant one that had a major pivot and that takes up most of my time is a business called Small is the New Big. And what we're about is about 10, 15 years ago, I went against the grain of property investing and started investing in properties where I could create micro apartments within existing dwellings or build new dwellings that had smaller studio spaces. So we're not talking about flats, we're talking about the old flatettes or the old studios that existed. And as part of that, I then realised that I could educate people to do exactly the same thing, because the one thing I realised specifically in Australia was that 60 to 80% of the people that are looking for accommodation are singles or couples, and 60 to 80% of our housing was 3, 4 and 5 bedroom housing. And so I wanted to make an impact and change the housing landscape so that we could get to a place where, out of the top 20 most unaffordable housing cities in the world, every year Australia has about 13 of them in the top 20 for worldwide. And it's just an absolute travesty that people that are young that want to get into the housing market can't. And so what I'm trying to do and what I am attempting to do and what I'm succeeding in doing is actually changing that landscape so that people can actually have some money to save at the end of every week by creating a micro apartment that they can live in. And that means that the residents that live in our properties within 3 to 5 years have enough money saved to they get into their own house with their own deposit. And that's probably my biggest game, to get people into housing again.
So how long have you been doing the business? 15 years?
So this particular business we opened up about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Christine and I are serial entrepreneurs. We've started 27 years now, 27 businesses. We're always looking for mismatches in the marketplace. So the first 10, let's say, first 10 to 15 were trials and tribulations of learning how to run a business. And since then, we've been pretty successful in, from development through to, I've done quite a few businesses, including a lot of natural therapies that I went into. And for those of you that are listening that don't know, I'm a plumber and builder by trade. And as a plumber, I also have a diploma in colonic irrigation. So one of the businesses I started was a colonic irrigation outlet where, I was a practitioner. And so installed my machine as a plumber and then helped people's plumbing as well.
It's probably a good time to dive back into the incontinence conversation then when you're talking about plumbing and everything. Now, let's focus on small is the new big then for today's conversation, because people will be interested to know, and the first question I have for you in relation to that is, when COVID-19 started to spread itself around the world, did you take any particular strategy at that time when you saw things developing and evolving that we were going to go into a lockdown situation with your business?
Yeah, we certainly did. As part of what I do is previously I'd travel around the country. We would have somewhere between a 6 to a 17 city tour that would take 19 or 20 days sometimes, where I was living out of a bag for most of it. And we would travel from city to city. We'd fly or drive, and I decided to go with Virgin rather than Qantas. That was a monumental mistake because there goes my frequent flyer program out the window. So we saw the writing on the wall pretty early on. We were getting numbers that were dwindling. And so I think we cancelled 3 of our final dates of our tour, and then we went online immediately. Now, I'm pretty fortunate that in this recording studio, I've got 2 guys that put it all together for me, and we went online. We switched up. We started using new technology. Darren, behind the desk there, he started looking at the different technology of how we could be more interactive in the marketplace, and we went online. And interestingly enough, we've I can't remember how many employees we've got. We've got 9, I think, in this particular business. And the interesting part of that is that we pivoted our business to for me to stay home. I've enjoyed it more because I'm around doing what I'd like to do, or around I only just jumped off the excavator in the backyard mucking around with that. And at the same time, our business has grown, and it's just been a really good, interesting way to look at business, and there's been a lot of learnings that have come from it.
So you were doing a lot of travel before this hit town, and as you say, you've moved into using new technology. How quickly did it take you to be able to adapt to that new technology? Was it basically an overnight switch that you could turn it on for your community?
It was almost literally overnight. I think we were 2 or 3 days in. So we were already online. We already had online presence. However, delivery online, we would only do occasionally once a month or twice a month. Darren and the boys put together the software package, all the different ins and outs, the cameras, the lighting was enhanced, and within 2 or 3 days, those 3 cities we combined into one presentation, and the feedback was pretty awesome. We concentrated on those cities, and we obviously made them feel nice. And then after that, we have continuously gone back, and we've gone from perhaps doing 2 online seminars, webinars per month to somewhere there's some days. A couple of weeks ago we did 5, one every day, and we're averaging about 3 to 4 every week now, where we're going out and giving content to people. Some of it free, some of it for our paid members. But what I did see was that people were going into this despair, insecurity, and fear, and what I wanted to make sure was that people had some confidence and some certainty, and so that's what we've been doing. We've been educating people around property and what's happening in the market, and not to be too scared and fearful, and to understand that this is something that we've never seen in our lifetime. But I don't see any fear in it, and the predictions that I made very early on have actually come to fruition. And thankfully, because of all this online presence, I actually have all those recordings where I did say what was going to happen, and it's actually come pretty close to where I think it is.
Now, you were able to turn the Titanic around pretty quickly as far as getting your business up and running online. How did your audience adapt to that? Did they pick it up just as quickly, or did you find that you lost some and gained some new ones? How did that work out?
I think we actually increased. I think the stalwarts that would always turn up at the seminars still turned up. Our show rate was probably better than the live events. The show rates at live events go somewhere between 30 to 50% show rate, which is a pretty low show rate when someone books in to come and see me. But that's across the industry. That's very normal. When we started going online, because people were home, we actually had a higher attendance, and we were talking 60s, 70% attendance. Now, we ran a 3-day, did we run 3 day, 2 days? 2-day event we ran to our paid members. And I just thought, there's 2 parts to this. The first thing I thought was, there is no way that they're going to sit behind a computer or a screen for 9 hours, 2 days in a row to watch me present and teach them. What surprised me was that in that event, we actually had near 80% show, and of the 80%, we went from maybe, the 100% of people that did turn up, I think we might have dropped off to 95% at worst, but it went up and down during, and I was just really surprised that people would hold their attention in their own home with all the distractions that goes on while I was teaching them from the other end. The second part to this was that there's a certain amount of energy that I receive from talking to a live audience. And I could do a 17-day tour, talk to audiences every day, and I would not feel any lethargy. Is that the word? I didn't feel lethargic at the end of the 17 days. At the end of the 2 days of delivering with no feedback from people live in front of me, it was like a truck had hit me. I seriously felt it like I'd never felt it before, and it was a very unique experience. And for me, the feedback loops were really important, which is why I said to the guys, I need to see their faces, I need to see what they're doing, and I need to see their reactions as well.
And how was the audience engagement over being online versus you standing up there and doing your show each time? How did you find that to be different?
It was one of the things that we made sure we put a lot of effort into, and so we created a lot of polls, we created a lot of interaction. The software package that we're using allows us to send off a link to them so that they can actually talk to me live via a standard web browser rather than going into Zoom or any of the online meeting platforms. And it then gave a level of interaction. We green screened some of it. We obviously had distancing for some period of the time of COVID. So in this small recording studio, we couldn't have more than 4 people in here. So if I was interviewing someone, we had to have that social distancing. But the interaction was quite interesting and open, and when we did want to talk, the chat box, like people making commentary, that's always been there, but I think it was just an enhanced experience for a lot of them. And I'd really love to be able to have an open cycle discussion with everyone that's on there. Sometimes we have well over 300 people on one event. It's a bit difficult at that point in time to be able to open up. We are gearing up to an event where we hope to get 500 to 600 people on the next event.
So as a result of doing this, have you decided to change your business strategy going forward? And when I say business strategy, the way that you present your business.
Yeah, one of well, we've always presented the business in the same vein as far as what we are achieving. We're here to create a housing environment where we create genuine community connection with the housing that we do. What we've done is we've gone back to the 60s, 70s, maybe early 80s in the housing that we provide. The one thing that we realised was that with the less travel, with the less ability to be able to move around the place, whilst it was good for me to teach people, what we have found is that people don't want to do it themselves. They want it done for them. So we came up with a pivoted product, which is what we call Do It For You, where rather than me having to teach someone how to do this strategy and they go out and find the property and do it themselves, we go and find the property for them. And that business in itself has grown significantly just in the time since COVID has kicked in. And we've spent a lot of time and energy getting the processes right. And there are some pretty happy people. When you go out and the standard environment at the moment is that if you can get 6 or 7% gross, you're doing pretty awesomely out of your property as an investment property. And we have a minimum of 8. We've got a few properties that we've bought for people that have got a 13% return. And for them, they're quite happy. So that pivot in the business meant that, well, I've got more time at home. It means that I'm not fluffing around on planes. I would easily be on a plane 2 to 3 times a week as a minimum. And I haven't been on a plane for months now. So this extra time has meant that I can focus on helping the talent in my office to produce this product, which is having a really great outcome. So we've shifted from an education-based program to a buyer's agency, I suppose you would call it, an advocacy to help people get into investment properties.
Do you think that change would have occurred without COVID, or do you think COVID's been a significant driver in that?
It would have changed eventually, and we were on it. We could see that that's where we were going, but what COVID meant was that it changed almost, we're talking within a week. Within a week, we realised that we needed a product out there. We got all the legals set up pretty quickly and, straight away out to the marketplace. And, the marketplace has been pretty happy with what we've put there.
What have been some of the best learnings for you as a business owner through this period?
Interestingly for myself as a business owner, the talent in my office are always talking about how my 2:00 morning thought is instigated at 7 a.m. in the morning. And that's because I like to be fairly agile in what we do in business. And the learnings for me is that I've got such an awesome group of team members around me that are so involved and treat this business as their own. And so the learnings for me was that by default, I accidentally trained them to be ready for Corona, for a pandemic, because of the way that I run my business and have always run my business. That, I don't believe in pivot for pivot's sake. I don't believe in changing the way that you're going in direction just because you need change. But I do see that if you can create a better business for yourself by making that change, then it should be done immediately. Don't frig around, the famous entrepreneurial saying of fail fast, right? So if you're going to go in, make a change and you see it doesn't work, well, change again or change back. And so the learnings for me was that I've created this amazing little team around me that are as agile as I am, if not more, because of I'm not as much a doer anymore. The other part of that is like I've already said, what absolutely blew my mind is that people have needed to go online for a long time, and now this has forced them into it. And I suppose the biggest learning for me is that having watched, and I was always okay. If someone wanted to work from home, I was fine with that. But what's happened is that every boss in the country has now realised that when they were fighting their employees working from home, that they never need to worry about that, because now what's happened and what's been proven is that not only can employees work from home, not only can they actually be as productive, if not more productive than they were before, but it actually relieves the owner of that business so that they're not so stressed. They're not actually having to be in work watching over things all the time. And that's been something for me that's been quite amazing. I mean, we've got still 2 or 3 of us that come into the office here because we need to be in here for recordings or whatever, but the rest of my talent in the office is working from home. And so that's, I think, a big change that's happened in Australia, and that will mean a big change to the property market moving forward.
Going to ask you to bring out your crystal ball again, because I'm going to ask you how significantly different, if at all, your business will look in the next 5 years, given that no one really knows what the new world order is going to look like. What do you think your business is going to look like in 5 years from now?
Yeah, I certainly, without ego, I pioneered what we're doing in this round going around. So when we talk about small spaces, micro apartments, building smaller, thinking smaller, I came to the marketplace first, and you know, as I said, 5 years ago, I'd been investing about 10 or 15 years ago in this style of product. I see that what's going to happen is that the significant change in the property market in the next 5 years is that the commercial spaces that had been used by 40 or 50 staff previously are now going to be 4 or 5 skeleton staff. And that means that the commercial marketplace in property is going to take a pretty significant hit. My main aim right now, and the planning I'm doing right now, is converting those commercial properties into micro apartment style outlets. So instead of having the home office where you work out of home, I'm going to produce the office home. So that is where you work from, is where you're going to live. So you might have 4 or 5 key employees on a floor plan which has 5 offices for each one of those employees, and those employees walk out the back door of their office and go into their own residential space. And it's something I've started to work with different councils, advising them on how we can make this work and how we can actually have a better outcome for the residential market and people to be able to afford their own housing again.
Great. Now, it sounds like you've weathered the storm pretty well compared to some people around the world, but I'd like you to kind of throw out there some of the challenges that still remain for you today in you know, sustaining what you've started up with this new business mindset.
Challenge-wise, you know, I think the right people is probably our biggest challenge. You know, with COVID and Corona, does that change anything? I can't really say that we've had any massive challenges when it comes to this switch. We actually, the challenge, I suppose the challenge would have been if we weren't agile enough to be able to shift to what we did. And that would have been a big challenge. But again, by accident and by default, we got ourselves into a position where everyone was willing to shift and change literally overnight. I see a lot of businesses suffering with that. I see a lot of businesses being so rigid in the way that they've always done things that they're not ready to evolve and do what's required moving forward. So, you know, unfortunately, the only thing I can say is that we're probably understaffed now, and our challenges have been that the ramp in the business during this period has meant that we need to find the right person. We think we have to the next person that we need, but that's probably been the most significant challenge for us, that we've actually had too much work come in, and we're chasing our tails every now and then.
What are a couple of the greatest personal benefits that have come out of this period for you personally?
The biggest, I think for me, the biggest benefit is the realization, personally, what's actually struck me was that as part of the online presence that we ramped up, I wanted to show people that out there is different availabilities of information that you can grasp from, that you can find out information that's readily available, learn about it. And I suppose for me, I've always been intrigued by conspiracy theories and the understanding of, you know, how, you know, if we want to call it the New World Order, runs the world, and the 13 families and all these conspiracy theories. Now, it's not that I subscribe to that stuff, but I just find it interesting that that information's out there. And so what I started to do was, just as a bit of information for people, I started to take them down the rabbit holes that you can go down. And to my surprise, people didn't want to hear it. They were absolutely, what's the word? They were they were polarized. They were absolutely polarized. They didn't want to know that there could be, not that I was promoting it, I was simply saying it's just interesting, have a listen to this. It's like a conversation that you and I would have somewhere. Like, oh, have you heard about such and such, or have you heard about this thing or that thing? They really could not handle it. It was too much for them to bear. And so what I had to do was actually pull back away from that, because I hardly had took them down any rabbit holes. And again, it's not that I believed in these conspiracy theories. I just think it's an interesting thing that people think that the whole coronavirus was, 5G. I was pulling my hair out. Is that yes? Right. That was the other thing. I had my own personal, probably the biggest personal thing that happened to me during Corona was that I'd been working on the house because I had this extra time at home. And I would jump in to get my online presence, and I hadn't combed my hair, and I was in a dirty shirt, and I wasn't clean shaven. And people made some huge judgments just around that. And that really shocked me, because I've always been happy with being able to say to people, this is who I am, take me as I am. And yet they just couldn't handle that I didn't have a clean shirt on. And one accused me of being an alcoholic. I'm drinking kombucha out of a beer bottle, which is what kombucha bottles come in. And I was accused of being an alcoholic. It was really quite confronting in that whole scenario. So, yeah, I suppose from the personal learnings from me is that sometimes you just have to hold back a little bit and not be too out there, because people just want the generalization in their life, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess we've seen all forms of humanity, and we continue to see that through this current period. Look, the last question I have for you today, Ian, is what are some of the tips you'd throw out there for people who are in startups today? It's a very difficult time. We're coming into unknown waters. You're a person that's had a lot of experience in starting up businesses. If people are out there today and they're a bit terrified about, they might have just started a business when COVID took off, or they might be in the process of having that great idea they want to launch. What's your advice to those people today?
Go watch a show called Silicon Valley. It's a funny, hilarious show about entrepreneurs. And, the quite simple thing for an entrepreneur is, what's my minimum viable product? What is the product that I can get to market that will have a return that actually starts to put money in the bank? And for us, we did a few of those. We created this Fly on the Wall series. So that is people that want to do property development but actually don't know how to do property development. So we said, well, why don't we just film every part of a property development I'm doing, and you can be the fly on the wall. So when you look as a business right now, that if you're in startup, you say, what fails, what stops a business being able to move forward? And quite simply, it's cash flow. And so ultimately, if you've got a minimum viable product, you've got money in the bank, and you can pace out your runway. How much time do I have before I run out of money? Then you then start to throw in the minimum viable product that actually says, I can go to the market and I can sell this, and I need to sell X amount of units per day, per week, per month, to be able to make sure that we stay alive and stay afloat, and that there is profit at the end of it. And then the question is, if there is profit at the end of it, do I re-inject into the next viable product, or do I simply go along and start shining this one up? And I think that's the biggest failings of business, that the numbers, the runway, and the revenue never ever matches up. And that's why we see so many startups not get through to the next phase. And it's something that I'd like to see more of, particularly in Australia, because I think we don't give enough support to startup entrepreneurs, and they really do need more support.
Excellent wrap up. Ian Ugarte, it's been fantastic having you on the Business Podcast show with me today. Thanks for sharing all your insights, and good luck, continuous luck with Small as the New Big. But thanks for sharing all those great tips with us on the show today, Ian, and I'm sure that we will catch up again soon.
Thanks, Mark. As always, a pleasure.
My guest today has been Mr. Ian Ugarte, talking to us from Australia. His business is The Small is the New Big, and he's into property development in Australia. So check out the show notes for all the contact details for Ian, as well as where you can find other episodes from the Global Business Podcast. We've just started our journey in this exciting space, and we're always looking for interesting guests from around the world who want to talk about business on the show, specifically around these times of COVID-19 and all the other impacts this has had on our economies. Lots to learn from us all about the way that business has been done. and is going to be done in the future. So if you're out there listening to the show today and you think, hey, I've got an idea I'd like to share with all the other business people around the world, drop me a note and we'll see if we can get you on the show pretty soon. That's it, folks. Well, I'm excited to be back again with you soon. My name's Mark Philpott. Thanks for listening in, and stay safe, stay well, and stay busy. Bye for now.